Afternoon and welcome to this hybrid meeting of Social Services, Housing and Community Safety Scrutiny Committee on the 4th of January 2023. I'm Councillor Helen Kerry-Clark and I will be chairing this meeting. Just to make everyone aware, this meeting will be recorded. Please can you ensure that your phones are switched to silent for the duration of the meeting and your microphones are muted when not speaking. If members wish to speak or ask a question, please could you raise your electronic hands or physical hand if in the council chamber. Also, for those in the chamber, please use your microphone when speaking. Today we'll be discussing the report contained within our scrutiny agenda, which is the consultation on the 2024-25 budget proposals. Agenda item 2, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest from members today based on the items we've chosen to scrutinise? No? Okay. Agenda item 3, consultation on the 24-25 budget proposals. The report included in our scrutiny agenda is the consultation on the 2024-25 budget proposals. We will today be looking at the elements that fall under the remit of this committee. Your comments from this meeting will form part of the formal consultation response for the budget. Members are reminded of your obligation as part of the budget consultation process to put forward any other proposals for budget savings which are not included within the attached report so that officers can give them consideration as soon as possible. Hugh Jones, do you have anything additional to add to the circulated report?
Just to add, Chair, thank you. Yes, in terms of the purpose of the meeting, as it says in the covering report, it's to look at the savings proposals pertinent to this committee. Within the actual main cabinet report, in the savings schedule in Appendix 4, we've clearly outlined which committee relates to which savings. So hopefully members can follow that through. Just in terms of the overall budget overview for members of the Scrutiny Committee, we are looking at increased costs next year of over £30 million. We've identified savings of which these form a part of 8.1 million as a council. We were anticipating 8.1 million from Welsh Government, and we'd planned and modelled on a 5% council tax increase. And even after using £6.8 million of directorate reserves, we are still consulting on a budget which has a gap of £2.7 million for next year. So almost a balanced budget, but still £2.7 million short. So in terms of the social services savings, I will now hand over to Mr. Jarrett, Chair, if that's okay, who will give an overview and talk through his colleagues will talk through the detail. Thank you.
Councillor Freegard, did you have a question for Hugh?
No, I just wanted to mention that I'm a member of the Fire Authority, which it is mentioned in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor. Andrew Jarrett.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, members, for attending today. I guess today's about scrutinising the savings that we are saying as a directorate that we will make next year. And I'm really proud of the fact that despite all of the demands and the additionality that we're dealing with as a social services, housing and community safety directorate, that we've been able to come up with the £2.063 million worth of savings that you see in front of you. At page 29, which is Appendix 4 in the report, the appendix, it starts to set out the detail of the makeup of those savings. Those are the things which I think we need to scrutinise today. I think there's something for officers now to talk members through in a bit more detail what exactly those savings are, so that you've got more of a view of them, Chair, if you're happy with that. Because otherwise you're just scrutinising what is a couple of lines on that page, and probably it doesn't tell you in enough detail exactly what we're doing. The other thing I'd say before we get into any scrutiny is that, as Hugh said, we're still short for next year as far as the budget is concerned. So if we take any of these savings off the table, then we will need to come up with additional savings and additional mechanisms to fill that gap. But even saying that, if members have got any other ideas about where we could make savings across social services, I would be absolutely happy to hear those. So, Chair, if you're happy, I'll ask the heads of service, and I'll go through with them the Appendix 4, which starts at social services at page 29 on my report. In any case,
Thank you, Andrew. Do you want to start with Angela, do you?
yeah, absolutely. Unless there's any questions at that point.
Okay, happy for me to start.
Yeah, Angela, so I'll ask you to start with, and if I reference it, the first one that I've got on my list is SHHH1, which is Transformation of Adult Services.
Okay, so I'll take members through these proposals line by line. You'll see on SHHH1, this looks more at the medium to longer term savings, but I will explain what this entails. As in all likelihood, we're going to need to speed up the transformation process given the financial outlook. So if we start with there's a number of things in there, and it is about the strategy for adult services. So with Tremor-Glyn, the older people's services, we're proposing to bring the Tremor-Glyn residential care home back in-house and utilise the former day service and the 3-bedded bungalow to create residential and community reablement and respite services for the county borough. So just for members to be aware, reablement is a period of up to 6 weeks intensive support by a physiotherapist or an occupational therapist to get people back on their feet and return home. Unlike neighbouring authorities in Swansea and Bridgend, Neath Talbot doesn't have this facility, and as a result we have a disproportionate number of people going into residential care too early in their lives. And just as an example, the average cost of a domiciliary care package, so that would be 14 hours a week, 2 calls a day, is around £336. The average cost of a residential care placement is over £800. So you can see the difference in retaining people in their own homes for longer. But just to add to that, in Neath Talbot alone, we have over 2,200 of double-handed calls. That would be 2 people entering somebody's home 4 times a day at a cost of £2.7 million. That's more than the entire cost of the in-house home care service. And if we could only have that reablement capacity, just reducing a quarter of those calls or reducing double-handed to single-handed would be saving us between 600,000 and £1 million. So we think that is a specific area that we need to target for older people. The next bit mentions Getley Gron. This is around learning disabilities and mental health. So we are proposing to create a transition team of dedicated social workers and legal representatives to look specifically at 2 things. Young people who are transitioning into adulthood. So we have a number of people who will be turning 18 in the next 2-3 years at a significant cost to children's services. If they come at that cost to adult services, you're talking about the next 50-60 years. So that's one specific area. The second area is adults who we have placed in out-of-county placements, residential care placements. We currently have over 120 people in placements that are costing over £100,000 a year, which is a cost of £14 million per year to the council. But we have a further 220 adults in placements that are costing between £50,000 and £100,000 per year, which is costing our average of another 15 million. So these are the big ticket numbers. You're talking 30 million on people who are in out-of-county residential care placements. And at the moment, we've got no alternatives for these individuals. So we are going to propose to utilise council-owned land at Getley Gron in Pontardawe to create residential and supported living accommodation to repatriate these adults back into Neath Talbot. Another part of that first SSHH1 is bespoke enterprises. Again, this is a council-run bespoke day service for adults with learning disabilities. We currently accommodate up to 80 people a day at a cost of £55 per day. There are a number of private providers out there charging up to £120 per day. What we're going to do is propose to convert existing office accommodation in bespoke so that we can provide a day service for people with more complex needs, and therefore be able to challenge the providers that if we can meet those needs at £55 a day, if you choose to go to an external provider, you can meet the difference. The final bit of that SSHH1 is the falls response. So we have been piloting a falls response service in the Avon area. The proposal is to extend that to the whole of the county borough, work with corporate colleagues in CCTV, assistive technologies to prevent people going into hospital after a fall. Once they go into hospital, they need a subsequent request for reablement care services or residential care. So it's that whole preventative agenda for older people, but we will extend that to the whole of pan disability. So that is, and I'll give you some examples of that in a minute. So if we move on to specifically next year, then 24-25, SSHH2, we're proposing to change the opening times of our day services. So currently we open between 9 and 5. If we change the opening hours, so this isn't reducing the service to the individual, it's changing the opening hours, which allows our environment transport colleagues to undertake the transporting of children to colleges, etc., which means we don't have to rely on taxi firms. And we've already come up with some figures which we think will surpass the 75,000 that we put in for next year, but we're looking at 75,000 next year and the year after. SSHH3 is directly linked to the bit I've just spoken about, the transformation bit. This is where we create a transition team ASAP to review all existing placements. And we're proposing that we reduce that budget by £500,000 next year. SSH4 and 6, that is where we're going to receive grant money from the regional pot. So we'll offset that against existing posts. So that's just a simple financial calculation. We'll just use that money against existing posts. And SSHH7, so currently within Neath Talbot, we have 32 supported living accommodations. This is where we have people in shared accommodation, where they have their own bedroom, their own bathroom, but they share living accommodation, etc. And we have people sleeping in that accommodation just in case something happens overnight. That sleeping in arrangement is costing the council £1.2 million, and we believe we can reduce by sharing these arrangements across certain schemes, initially with a saving of 350k next year. And just as one example, one young man who we have to turn every night, once a night, due to his needs, is costing the council £140,000 a year. And then finally on SSHH8, we're going to do a full review of direct payments. Direct payments have gone through the roof, and we're in a real dilemma when we compare ourselves to England. In England, it's frowned upon for family members to be the recipient of a direct payment. In Wales, it's the opposite. And we seem to be having more and more people coming forward as family members to undertake shopping, etc. So we're having a full review of where we're at with that, and we're proposing that we take £100,000 out next year. If I could just sum up, Chair, none of these proposals will come without risk. I think the biggest risk for adult services if we do not regain control of our markets. Providers are currently naming their price, and the sooner we can bring services back in-house and take control, the better. But there are other significant risks. There will be resistance from families. No one will want to see their packages reduced, and no one takes too kindly to change. So we will be bringing papers back to committee this year, which will highlight risks associated with this budget strategy and some decisions which members might seem unpalatable. However, the biggest risk of all is doing nothing. As I say, the provider market is in the driving seat, and if we don't do something differently, then this budget will simply grow and grow. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Angela. Can I just ask you to cover SSHH5, which you didn't cover?
Sorry, where is 5?
It's the staff restructuring.
Oh, sorry. Yes, sorry. Okay, we will have a target response, so early retirement voluntary redundancy. If we'll have a targeted, if there are people who are wanting to go, we will look at these posts to see whether we can restructure on the back of it so that we've still got resilience in the service. The reason I say targeted, this won't be open to frontline social workers or people we need to deliver these services. But if there are specific posts or people who come forward and say that they were prepared to go, they want to go, they've had enough, then we will look at those posts specifically and look at if we can restructure to make sure that we've still got that resilience. Apologies, Chair.
No problem. Thanks, Angela. Has anybody got any questions on those? Councillor Freegard.
Yeah, thanks, Angela. Thanks for that report. that was much clearer than looking at the sheets, as Andrew said. I just wanted to ask about SSHH7, the sleeping in arrangements. Are we able to do this safely, and how do you know that we're able to do this safely? For example, the one thing that you mentioned was the gentleman that needed turning every night. So
yeah,
obviously you've looked into this. How do we do this safely? And what have you done to ensure that have you done a risk assessment or what?
There'll be a risk assessment against every one of these, Councillor Freegard, but specifically in answer to your question, we have, for example, in the Britain Ferry area, a significant number of supported living arrangements, all in very close proximity.
Yeah.
So with things like assistive technology, you know, you already do it for older people with lifelines, don't we? So if you've literally got two supported accommodation next door to each other, you don't actually need two people in each establishment. You know, you could make the call and that person could call next door. So there are ways around this, and there are assistive technologies now which can alert us to things much better. This is really old school, just in case, you know, very safe. And the other thing we're doing is analysing just how many people are called in a year, you know, because we're paying £1.2 million for this service, and I'm not convinced that we're getting value for money here at all. The individual who needs turning, we've looked up a number of things. Are there beds out there now that will do this for us? There's different technologies and ways, so we're exploring every avenue. But again, this particular gentleman was part of a core and cluster arrangement which never materialised. So it was never intended that this individual would have one-to-one turning. Although he needs it, it was shared with other people. At the moment, we're paying just for this one person on his own. So we're having to explore it all. That wasn't the intention when that was set up. But as things stand, it's still costing us £140,000 a year for one individual. And these things simply aren't sustainable.
Yeah, and I totally agree with what you're saying, but on health and safety grounds, obviously that has to come first. Are you talking anywhere about we're going back to sort of lone working?
No, that doesn't come
So
into
that's
this.
not going to happen.
No, that's not part of
It's a
this.
challenging situation, and staff need to feel secure and safe themselves, really.
Yeah, no, I think you take on board. I think the sooner we start taking control of some, how do I put it? These supported living arrangements have grown arms and legs over the years.
Yeah.
They're an old model of care, and we've been moving towards what we call a core and cluster. So you have a number of homes in close proximity where you can share the care. You know, obviously there are individuals who are very high profile and they will require that one-to-one support, but there are a lot of individuals who are getting themselves to day services, getting on buses at weekends, socialising. So, you know, you don't necessarily need that intensive support for all of those individuals. And when we talk about risk, as I've said, none of this comes without risk. You know, anything we do with people, vulnerabilities are risky things. So I'm not going to hide behind the fact there aren't risks involved, but they'll be calculated, and we'll be bringing these back to members so that we share that between us before we actually do anything.
Okay, thank you.
Andrew wants to come in here. Hang on a second. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Freegard, for that question. I think that's absolutely the right question when we're looking at savings versus risks. I see our job in social services and as a council about managing risk. And I guess the undertaking that I will give to members is that we'll give assessments for each individual. And that's going to be important. That will look at what the risks are of providing different services, but also that assessment will also take account of staff needs as well and making sure that staff are safe. If there is no other way to provide a safe service for someone who needs it, then we will continue to provide sleep-ins. What we're looking at is assessing, and where we can assess that it's safe to do so, we will change the service delivery. So that's the assurance I give councillors.
Okay.
Is that all right for you, Sharon?
Yeah, I did have another question, Chair, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
SHH5, the retirement one, it ties in with another question that I'd raised within the report about vacancies. So if we're talking about redundancies, how do we know those posts are redundant posts? And are we leaving ourselves wide open, cutting staff?
I'm not carrying that many vacancies at the moment, Councillor Freegard. In fact, part of this is asking for more staff in terms of that transition team, for example. What we're saying is there may be, you know, it's not a given, there may be people in the organisation who are saying that, you know, this huge change and this huge transformation that's coming about, it's not for them. They might have had enough. I won't be making people compulsory redundant, but for every vacancy that appears, we will be looking at it as to whether that job is absolutely required. Do we need to fill it, or could we keep it vacant? Or, you know, that we've just looked and scrutinise every single. We've already looked at a couple of areas, which I'll share at a future point, where we think there are some efficiencies that we could make. But it will be on the back of people saying that they're wanting to leave the organisation, as opposed to us targeting individuals.
The reason I raised that question was because on page 10 of the whole report, it said that vacant posts, whether they need filling or not, that we would not be filling them within the year 24-25. So I just wondered how many vacancies were in social services, and whether or not, if we did without those posts for a year, then obviously we don't need the posts in the first place. So it was a bit misleading reading the whole report with it not being specific just to social services, and that I think that's raised a few questions from a few of us today.
Okay, that first part of the report isn't what I'm reflecting in my bit here.
No, but when we're reading that in the first part of the report, and then you were telling us that you may need extra staff. Yeah, it doesn't seem to marry up, you know.
No, I take your point.
Councillor Freegard, can I ask you just to point us to that line?
I've got written down because my laptop's not working. Sorry, Andrew. On page 10, I think it was towards the top of the page. It said about vacant posts. It may not be specific to social services, but it was saying that if they didn't need filling, that they wouldn't be filled within 24-25. And then I was going to ask the questions, well, are we stopping creating posts? But clearly that's not the case. So it is all a little bit confusing when it's not specific. The report now at the beginning is not specific. It doesn't appear for social services.
I think Hugh's going to come in here to try and explain.
Yeah, if we look at that page 10, it specifically says during the current financial year, specific measures taken. So current financial year being 2023-24. So it doesn't relate to the savings proposals for next year.
Right.
It's related. It's around the work we've done in year to deal with the budget pressure. So hope that.
So again, Hugh, why, you know, if we've been able to do that in 23-24, then why aren't we doing it in 24-25? And what area is that specific to? And you talk about, we go on then to talk about infrastructure projects, new projects, but then we don't have the costing for those. So it leads on to all sorts of different issues.
Well, just to reply there, obviously this report is the Cabinet report that was scrutinised by the Cabinet Committee. The purpose of today's meeting, as set out in the covering report, is to deal with the savings proposals in Appendix 4. So,
exactly. So I think perhaps it may have been better to have had this report fragmented purely for social services, because if the report is before us and questions are raised, then it should be raised, because otherwise we're not doing our jobs.
Okay, I'll take your point for future years. We'll just put the element of the appendix relating to the committee as part of the covering report, so there's no ambiguity about the purpose of it. And obviously, any members of this scrutiny committee can ask the chair of the Cabinet Scrutiny Committee to join that meeting if they have questions on anything that's not pertinent to this committee. So thank you for that. Exactly. And I'll take that on board.
And it is on page 14. You talk about the new infrastructure projects, but you don't mention how many jobs are attached to that, or the costings specifically in this financial context. Okay, thanks, Sue.
Thanks. Councillor Rahman?
Yes, thank you, Chair. My question is to Angela again. I think it's the item SSHH one. The first one you mentioned, Angela. You mentioned Tremor Glen, bringing it back in-house. Would you be able to give us a timescale? And I'm sure a business case will be presented to members at some point in the near future in terms of bringing it in-house. I'm in support of services coming back in-house, but just a little concerned that bringing any services back in-house can be complex, not just financially, but logistically. Can you reassure Angela that the current dilemma we have with Celtic Ledger, the delay is not repeated here?
Yes, I can give you I can actually tell you that. I've met with Pobl. I've already given them the heads up that that is the wish of the council to bring the residential care home back in-house, and that we will convert the existing parts of it to create that reablement and respite facility. We need that additional residential and respite facilities within, we've got no control of our market, so they need to come back in. And yes, Pobl will work with us to ensure that happens. We're looking at, it may be ambitious to say September, but we certainly want the reablement bit up and running by September, but some guarantees that by this time next year, it will be back in-house in its entirety.
Thank you.
Councillor Whitelock.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Point for Hugh and Andrew, really. I was going to bring it up later on. In the past, we've had directorate-specific budgeting meetings like today, where we weren't given the whole budget en bloc. We used to have a breakdown of social services, education. So when we were looking at it, we were only looking at the proposals for this directorate. I wonder if there's any way we could go back to that. It would save some of the confusion over what we're actually looking at today.
Yeah, certainly. I've just given that assurance to Councillor Freegar that we'll take that feedback on board and make sure that future specific scrutiny meetings will only have papers relevant to them, as opposed to being asked to reference a certain appendix in another report. So it's been quite difficult with the cabinet meeting being on the Wednesday before Christmas, and obviously requiring to do these meetings straight after Christmas, and sort of time didn't allow us to do that this year. So for that, I apologise, and we'll take it on board. Thank you. Diolch.
Right, thank you.
Yeah, okay, Chair, if there's no other questions, if we can move on then to the savings from Children's Services for next year, and I'll hand over to Kerry Warren, who will start at SSH9. Kerry?
Good afternoon, everyone. So I'll work my way through the list. It starts off with a reduction in residential placements for young people. So to put that very briefly into context, historically, pre-COVID, we had one of the lowest numbers of young people in residential care in Wales. That doubled during and immediately post-COVID. And as you've heard me talk previously, that was about youngsters with significant additional needs, being at home for a long period of time, like a pressure cooker, at home with family members, and it just simply, families, carers couldn't cope any longer. So we saw a rise in those numbers. They are starting to plateau. There's a huge amount of work going on behind the scenes to bring those young people back into Neath. And you can see there, we've worked out with the launch of our new Foster Plus scheme, and that's recruiting a small number of specialist foster carers that are trained, that are experienced. They'll be supported with a therapeutic offer, which will also help some of those youngsters not only step down from residential care into families' homes in Neath Talbot, but it'll also help with returning young people back into education. So it's a good support across children's services and education in recognising some of the pressures there. It will give us a saving with 2 young people stepping down. It'll give us a saving of just over £200,000, as you can see. And I'm pleased to tell you that we're about to launch the new service, and we've already had pre-launch a couple of interested parties. So we're very excited about this. just 2 families coming forward would make that saving. And just to give you a little bit more detail, we've got 4 young people that are ready and would be able to go into those step down provisions. So over the next few months, I'll be able to update you on that, but that's something that we are very excited about. And the other part of that is a step down provision in the community, in recognising that some older youngsters that are in residential care have been assessed as needing perhaps a different accommodation to coming into foster care. So they would be stepping down into a supported accommodation. I've been working, and the teams have been working closely together with Chalet and with housing around what that would look like. And what we've learned over COVID is that much smaller provisions with the therapeutic sort of input, that cutting, as Vic Smith always says, makes a massive difference to youngsters that are still very vulnerable and young. So that gives us our biggest saving. And then much more straightforward is our recharge to Hillside. So as you know, we have the only secure unit in Wales. And although we have been reclaiming some monies from Hillside, we haven't reclaimed chief officer time or principal officer time. So that's allowed us now to fully make that claim going forward at a recharge of £92,000 per year. Moving on, as you know, a huge piece of work's gone on with taxi routes. Blinking Heck, they're a licence to print money, I think, over the last couple of years. And again, really good piece of work with education, looking at taxis. And just by us working more closely together, by working more closely with families, payments directly to families, and monitoring that arrangement where they're booking their own taxis, will bring in a saving of around £100,000 a year, and linking families together better, so the kids are travelling in the cars together. It's common sense. It's common sense, and it's brought in an immediate saving for us. Moving on, as you know, we support a growing number of unaccompanied asylum-seeking children, and we have a grant from the Home Office in order to do that, and we have brought in some additional staff, but in the main we're using our own staff to support these young people. So we are able then to have that money funded by the Home Office, which comes in at £117,000. And lastly, as naturally as children turn 18 and they've been subject to grants, as children, residents and special guardianship orders, they come to an end at 18. So we've worked out the number of children that will turn 18 over the next financial year, and that will bring us in a saving of a further £50,000. That's a bit of a whistle-stop tour for me, and I'm happy to answer any questions or give some more information.
Thank you, Kerry. Any questions for Kerry? Councillor Freegard?
Yeah, thanks, Kerry, for that. Yeah, if you would give some more information, I'm not quite clear. Do you know the asylum children? Surely, weren't we claiming the money back last year then? How are we saving the money there? How are we making savings there? And also, if you could just expand on the recharge of the £92,000 for time you said with the Hillside. I didn't quite understand that.
Okay, so with regards to the US children, Home Office fund us for that, and I think what's happened is that initially it was new to us, it was new to everybody, and what we've managed to do is train up our own staff. They've gained experience over time, so they've been able to take on some of those roles themselves. But the funding has always come in, but previously we've had to use external sources, and now I guess we've been able to train up our own. So we've been able.
Yeah.
Lovely. And in relation to Hillside, I spend a huge amount of my time as head of children's services supporting Hillside. So do my principal officers. And we're in a position to charge for some of that time. So we've so we're able to recharge Hillside to the sum of £92,000.
How haven't we been able to do that in the past then?
We have done it, but not fully. So I think it's
haven't we done it fully? Was there a reason, a specific reason?
Well, I suppose I've asked the question, so I think the director can help me. I think there's some monies reclaimed for director's time, but when I asked specifically about head of children's services time and principal officers time, and I suppose things have changed. So children's services now are spending a lot more time supporting Hillside. So I think it's only fair then that money is reclaimed. So I think probably the situation has changed over the years as well. We tend to do that ourselves, whereas previously maybe officers from other parts of the council were coming in to help with if there were employment issues or disciplinaries or whatever, where we do that ourselves now. But I am recharging Hillside for us to be able to do that.
Is
Andrew's going to come in here.
We can
Karen.
actually. Oh, sorry, go on.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Freegard. Just to reinforce what Kerry was saying. So the 92,000 isn't the full recharge for Hillside. So we've always claimed some money from Hillside, and if Scrutiny Committee wanted to look at that in more detail, then you can request a report comes back to your committee at a later stage. The additional, what we're saying is we're claiming now an additional 92,000. That is based on what Kerry said, which is the additionality that we as a service are having to put in, both as managers at all levels, to support Hillside as it goes forward. Whilst we can't make a profit out of Hillside because of our agreement with Welsh Government, I also don't think we should be subsidising Hillside. So we should be reclaiming the full cost. This is the current full cost. So it will be 92 plus whatever we've claimed in previous years. And it's right that we do that, I think.
Do you want to come back on that, Sharon?
Yeah, I think perhaps it could be expanded upon, Andrew, perhaps for us to understand as a committee later on. I still don't understand why, if we're not giving the additional support in previous years, why we haven't claimed that, because it is a challenging situation, isn't it? And I would have always thought that we'd be giving additional support there. Are you saying that we haven't always claimed what we should have?
Oh, sorry, my mic wasn't on. We've given more support this year and next year than we have in the past. So Kerry's had to spend a lot more time up in Hillside supporting the service, and that's why we're claiming back. Also, our quality assurance manager has been up there probably once a week. So we've claimed that back. I'm happy for us to bring a report to look at the finances for Hillside in the future, if that helps.
That's fine. Because I'm sure at some point those finances would come back. Is there any specific reason why we need to put additional support in for this particular year, Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, Don, can people hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Yeah, okay. Yes, I mean, as you say, we've got some very complex children in Hillside. We've had to look at the staffing. We've had to look at the structure of Hillside. So we've reassessed all of that, and you've had reports on that to Scrutiny Committee. That does take additional officer time, and the support that the manager and the staff needs more officer time from senior management. That's the reason why. We wouldn't just allow them to flounder. Where it's needed, Kerry will step in. She does a number of meetings now up in Hillside that wouldn't have happened before. As I say, officers at all levels from within the council are spending more time in Hillside because of the complexity of the children, the management of that risk.
Okay, thank you, Andrew.
Any further questions for Kerry? No? Go back to Andrew then.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. The last one is housing and homelessness, but as you can see, the savings are as a result of the transformation program that we're anticipating from the housing and homelessness, which you've already seen. So I'm not anticipating asking Chalet to go through that today, given that the main focus of this scrutiny is on the savings that we are intending to make next year. So I think just as long as you're happy with that, Chair, I think just to sum up, we've got two things happening in Social Services, Housing and Community Safety Directorate. We've got the savings that we need to make as part of the wider council work that we're doing to make sure that we've got a balanced budget for next year. But on top of that, we've also got the work that we're doing, as Angela said, to make sure that we're not standing still. So that transformation program, which allows us to drive costs down in the future by presenting services in a different way. And you will hear about that in scrutiny committees in the first 6 months of this year in a lot more detail about what we're doing, because that will be the central plank of the work that we're doing across the directorate, both in housing and homelessness to prevent people becoming becoming homeless and providing them with housing when they need it. But also that strategy to deal with the ever increasing complexity and number of adult services and children's services clients that are coming through the system. I'm happy to take any questions on that last bit, Chair.
No questions? Okay then. So this report is for consultation purposes. Do you want to speak, Chalet? Sorry. No.
Oh, I didn't have my hand up, sorry.
Okay. So yeah, as I said, this report's for consultation purposes. Therefore, we note the report. Thank you all very much for attending, and we now close the meeting. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.